They looked like the perfect couple, smiling in photos, holding hands at dinner parties, building a life together. But behind closed doors, something was breaking. And it wasn't the finances, or the kids, or even infidelity. It was sex. Yes, the very thing we associate with intimacy, pleasure, and connection can quietly become the wedge that drives two people apart. This isn't about the lack of sex alone. It's about what happens when sex stops being a language of love and turns into a battleground of unmet needs, quiet resentments, and unspoken shame. Many people think that divorce is caused by big, loud events, cheating, fighting, betrayal. But the truth is, for millions of couples, the road to separation begins in silence, in the quiet absence of touch, or in the painful presence of intimacy that no longer feels intimate. This video isn't about judging anyone's sex life. It's about understanding the powerful emotional undercurrent that lives beneath physical connection and what happens when that current runs dry. Because sex is never just sex. It's communication. It's vulnerability. It's a mirror. And sometimes what it reflects is the end. Let's talk about why. Sex is more than just a physical act. It's a language, a silent conversation between two people. And when it works, it can speak volumes. I see you. I choose you. I still want you. In healthy relationships, sex is a way to reinforce love, trust, and connection. It's a moment where two people let their guards down, where vulnerability becomes a strength, and where pleasure becomes shared joy. But what happens when that connection begins to fade? For some, sex turns into a routine, something they should do rather than something they want to do. For others, it becomes a source of stress, rejection, or confusion. What once felt like a bridge between two hearts now feels like a wall. And here's the truth. When sex disappears from a relationship, it's rarely about sex itself. It's usually a symptom, a signal that something deeper is being ignored. Sometimes it's resentment that hasn't been voiced. Sometimes it's emotional distance that hasn't been acknowledged. And sometimes it's trauma, insecurity, or shame quietly growing in the background. Sex can reveal things we don't want to admit about ourselves, our partners, and our relationship. For one person, avoiding sex might be about exhaustion or feeling unloved. For the other, it might feel like rejection or proof they're not desirable anymore. And when these meanings clash without being talked about, it's not the act that breaks the couple, it's the silence around it. Sex, when treated with care, can be healing. But when ignored, used as a weapon, or reduced to a task, it becomes dangerous. It becomes a trigger, a wound, a quiet countdown to goodbye. Every couple starts with desire. But over time, that desire doesn't always stay equal. One partner wants it more, the other less. And soon, the bedroom becomes a battleground. This mismatch in sexual desire is one of the most common and least talked about reasons couples drift apart. It starts small. One partner initiates, the other says, "Not tonight." Once, then again, then again. What seems like a passing phase becomes a pattern. The one who wants more feels rejected, unwanted, undesirable. The one who wants less feels pressured, guilty, resentful. No one is wrong, and yet everyone feels like they're failing. Sometimes, mismatched libidos are about biology. Hormones, stress, fatigue, or medical issues. Other times, they're emotional. One person craves closeness through sex, while the other needs emotional safety before they can even think about it. But the real danger comes when no one talks about it. When silence replaces honesty, assumptions creep in. He doesn't want me anymore. She's never in the mood. I must not be attractive. He must be cheating. She's punishing me. Suddenly, what began as a difference in rhythm turns into a story of rejection and blame. And the more rejection one partner feels, the less they try. The less they try, the more abandoned the other feels. The more abandoned they feel, the more resentment builds. It's a vicious cycle, and few couples know how to escape it. But here's the truth: desire doesn't have to match perfectly. What matters is how you talk about it. How you make space for each other's needs without guilt or shame. How you stop making it personal and start making it intentional. Sex doesn't die because desire fades. It dies because people stop being curious. Stop trying. Stop listening. And when that happens, it's not just the sex that suffers. It's the whole relationship. We still have sex, but it feels empty. That quiet sentence hides a deeper pain, one that's harder to explain and even harder to fix. Because for many couples, the problem isn't that sex has stopped. It's that sex has stopped feeling intimate. They go through the motions. Bodies move. Skin touches. But the heart? The heart feels alone. This is emotional disconnect during intimacy, when two people share a bed but not their truth. It can look like this. You're together, but not present. You're naked, but still hiding. You're touching, but not feeling. It's one of the most confusing dynamics in a relationship. From the outside, everything seems fine. But deep inside, something is missing. Sometimes it's unspoken resentment. Sometimes it's fear of being vulnerable. Sometimes it's a history of emotional wounds that never healed. And sometimes it's just loneliness. A kind of quiet grief that no one ever talks about, grieving the connection that once was. For women, emotional disconnect often shows up as a loss of desire. For men, it might show up as frustration or even withdrawal. But for both, the root is the same. I don't feel safe being fully myself with you anymore. And that's what real intimacy is, not just physical access, but emotional safety. The freedom to be flawed, to be soft, to be open. When couples stop sharing emotionally, sex becomes mechanical. It becomes something to check off a list, not something that breathes life into the relationship. Eventually, one partner may stop initiating. The other may stop responding. And soon, even when they're in the same bed, they feel like strangers. This kind of disconnect is harder to fix than a dry spell. Because it's not about desire, it's about distance. And the longer that distance grows, the harder it is to find your way back. When a relationship ends because of cheating, it's easy to point the finger. They broke the trust. They ruined everything. But infidelity isn't always the beginning of the end. Sometimes, it's the explosion that follows years of emotional silence, unmet needs, and sexual frustration. It's not an excuse, it's a symptom. People don't usually cheat because they're evil or cruel. They cheat because something inside them feels unseen, unfed, unhealed. Sexual betrayal often starts emotionally. A lingering glance. A late-night conversation. Someone finally asking, "Are you okay?" when their partner stopped asking long ago. And then it escalates. Because attention feels like oxygen when you've been emotionally suffocating. Desire feels like power when you've been feeling invisible. Connection, even if fleeting and forbidden, feels like relief. Again, this doesn't justify the betrayal. It just explains the psychology behind it. Cheating rarely happens in happy, sexually connected relationships. It thrives where there is distance, resentment, and silence. For some, the affair isn't about the person they cheat with, it's about the person they've become. Someone who's desperate to feel alive again. Desired again. Someone who's lost their sense of identity in a relationship that no longer reflects who they are. But here's the twist. Infidelity isn't always the cause of divorce. Sometimes it's the consequence of a divorce that's already happening, emotionally, behind the scenes. By the time someone cheats, the marriage may have already eroded. The bed may already be cold. The hearts may already be miles apart. And while some couples can heal from betrayal, many can't, not because of the act itself, but because of everything that led to it. So when sex disappears from a relationship or becomes a source of pain, it's not just about what's happening in the bedroom. It's about what's not happening everywhere else. In almost every culture, sex is shaped by deeply rooted gender roles. Roles that tell us how men should behave, how women should feel, and what normal desire looks like. These myths don't just hurt individuals, they destroy relationships from the inside out. Take this one. Men always want sex. It creates immense pressure for men to perform, to initiate, to prove their masculinity through desire. So what happens when a man doesn't feel like it? He hides, he pretends, or he feels ashamed, like something is broken inside him. And then there's this one. Women don't care about sex. It paints women as passive receivers rather than active participants. So when a woman wants more sex, she may feel embarrassed. And when she doesn't want it at all, she might feel defective or blamed. These stereotypes rob couples of real intimacy. Because instead of learning who their partner truly is, people rely on scripts written by movies, society, and outdated ideas about gender. Some women grow up believing that sex is something to give, not something to enjoy. Some men believe that if their partner says no, it means they are not man enough. And in these roles, there is no room for curiosity, no room for vulnerability, no room for growth. Worse, these myths often turn sex into a transaction. I did the dishes, now you owe me. We haven't done it in weeks, what's wrong with you? The result? Sex becomes about obligation, not connection. About expectation, not exploration. And couples begin to drift. Because no one wants to be desired out of duty. No one wants to perform a role instead of being seen. To build real sexual connection, we have to unlearn what we were told. We have to listen to each other, not to stereotypes. Because intimacy doesn't come from playing a part. It comes from showing up real, raw, and willing. If sex is a language, then silence is its greatest enemy. Many couples talk about everything: bills, schedules, groceries, even the weather. But when it comes to sex, they freeze. Why? Because talking about sex requires vulnerability. It means saying what you need, what you fear, what you fantasize about. And for most people, those things feel terrifying. We're not taught how to have these conversations. We're taught to avoid them, to assume, to hope our partner just knows. But no one is a mind reader. And over time, silence creates distance. One partner feels unheard. The other feels misunderstood. And soon, they're not just missing out on sex, they're missing each other completely. Here's what often happens. Someone is unhappy with the physical intimacy, but says nothing out of fear of hurting their partner. The partner senses something is wrong, but doesn't ask, afraid of what they might hear. Instead of talking, they both begin to retreat. Emotionally, physically. Sex becomes rare, then robotic, then gone. And what's left is two people who love each other, but don't know how to reach each other anymore. When sex is good, it's a conversation without words. When it's struggling, it needs words. Yet people avoid the conversation because they fear it will make things worse. But the truth is, not talking is what does the damage. Talking about sex doesn't mean blaming or demanding. It means asking, listening, exploring. It means creating a space where both people can be fully honest without fear of judgment. What do you like? What do you miss? What makes you feel close to me? What makes you feel far away? These aren't easy questions, but they're the ones that save relationships. Because the problem isn't that people change, we all do. The problem is that we stop updating each other along the way. And in that silence, love slowly erodes. By the time many couples walk into a therapist's office, something has already died. Not the love, necessarily, but the hope, the belief that things can actually change. One partner says, "We're here because we want to save the relationship." But often, what they really mean is, We're here because this is our last shot before we give up. And the tragedy? They could have come years earlier. Therapy is often seen as a last resort, when it should be a regular tune-up, like checking in on a car before it breaks down. When sexual disconnection begins, most couples don't seek help. They tell themselves, "It's just a phase. We'll fix it when life calms down." Other people probably go through this too. But then the phase becomes the norm. The silence gets louder. And one day, they look at each other and feel like strangers. By that point, therapy isn't about rebuilding. It's about deciding whether there's anything left to save. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. It's not the big problems that end relationships, it's the small ones that are ignored for too long. The unspoken frustrations, the avoided conversations, the intimacy that faded without a fight. Therapy can be powerful. It can revive desire, repair trust, and rebuild emotional bridges. But only if both people are still willing to show up, still willing to listen, still willing to be honest. Because no amount of advice, no expert in the world, can save a relationship where one or both people have already checked out emotionally. Love isn't just about staying. It's about trying, even when it's awkward, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Can sex save a broken marriage? The honest answer, not by itself. But when done right with care, honesty, and emotional presence, sex can be the door back to connection, back to feeling chosen, seen, loved. Because sex, at its best, isn't about performance. It's about presence. It's about looking at your partner and saying, "I'm still here. With you. For you." But here's the truth most people don't hear enough. Fixing a broken sex life doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts in the heart. It starts with conversations, with owning your needs instead of hiding them, with listening without defense, with touching each other again, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity. It starts with asking, "What do you need to feel safe with me?" And meaning it. Because sex won't fix resentment. It won't erase betrayal. It won't cure loneliness. But it can become a healing ritual if both people are willing to rebuild not just their physical intimacy, but their emotional one. Marriage doesn't fall apart when sex stops. It falls apart when people stop caring why it stopped. So ask, touch, be brave enough to speak, and be even braver to hear the truth. Because sometimes the way back to each other starts with one honest moment, one vulnerable night, one "I miss you" said not with words, but with the kind of touch that says, "I still choose us."